Welcome to the Oarboard Ambassadors meeting, June 2021. We've got special guest, Aquil Abdullah. We've got a good little episode for you today. I think, let me just go over a quick little agenda before we get going. So I'll share my screen right here. Where's the share screen? This one. And really what we'll do is we'll go through over a quick welcome. We'll do some very brief introductions, and then we'll move into storytelling with Aquil and have him talk about his experience telling stories, his experience with rowing. And then we'll actually switch this up where we'll have some practice. So each and every one of us on the call will get some practice to boost our story and to use some of the techniques that Aquil has shared with us to tell just a slightly different story. So it'll be a bit akin to Toastmasters. I'm thinking if you've ever done Toastmasters, I myself am a competent communicator. I went through that many years ago. So I think this will be helpful just to build our skill development together and enjoy. Is there anything else anyone wants to put on the agenda? Okay, that's great. Well, with, Aquil is our guest of honor. And before I introduce him, I think I want to introduce each and every one of you. So let's go around, just tell me your name and where you're from. So we'll start with Marty.
Well, hello, good morning. Thanks for joining us, Aquil, and for sake of being super corny, namaste. I have a Hydrow. I've had a Hydrow since March 16th, and other than when I had a little back pain and I've been out of town, I rode it every day. It literally has changed my life, kind of like the Oarboard. Anyway, I live in San Luis Obispo, California, member of the San Luis Obispo Rowing Club, which started our second sessions of our summer novice rowing classes last Saturday with a sold out group of rowers for that club. So anyway, that's me, that's my story. And I've been with Oarboard now, I guess, come up maybe close to a year. It's been great.
Yeah, you've been a great ambassador, great member of the community. So I appreciate you having you on the call, Marty. We'll move to Gary. Gary Stewart, where are you coming in from?
Hi, I'm Gary. I'm from Winnipeg, Canada, but I do most of my rowing in the Kona, Ontario area on beautiful Lake of the Woods. And I just had my Oarboard in the water for the first time about a week ago. So due to COVID travel restrictions at all, it was a little late getting going, but we're there.
Awesome. That's great. And we'll move to Jeffrey Lindsay. Where are you calling in from?
Hi, I'm in Austin, Texas. I recently showed off the Oarboard to a fellow Austinite, and I had my first confirmed referral sale. And she is actually, I'm excited about that too. She's actually such a hardcore rower that she's rowed a marathon on the water in an 8 in Austin, just going back and forth between our 2 dams. So now that she's all geared up, hopefully we'll go out for a row again soon.
Yeah, that's good to hear, Jeffrey. Dana Randall, welcome. Where are you calling in from?
Hi there. I'm from calling in from Indian River, Michigan. It's sort of in the northern part of Michigan. So I'm on Burt Lake, which is a big inland lake, about 10 miles long. So I rode this morning. I used my Oarboard on the lake for, exercise, which was awesome. I always feel great. And even if it's like 50 degrees out, I'm so hot that I take a swim no matter what. So it's a good workout, and I always have a nice swim afterward.
Oh yeah, a nice dunk in the water.
I love it.
That's great. Well, welcome, Dana. And Deb, where are you calling in from, Deb?
I'm in.
Ooh, we're having trouble hearing you, Deb. We're having trouble hearing you. Here, just type in the chat. Where are you calling in from? And while Deb's typing in where she's from, she's calling in from Reno, Nevada. It's great to have you on board. And if you don't get your mic fixed, we'll just do it over text, some of the storytelling exercises, which I think would be good. Now, Alain, where are you calling in from?
I'm from Montreal, Quebec.
Yeah, bien.
Montreal, Quebec. We turned green this week. All of the entire province has turned green to COVID. So we are going to learn to live a totally different life.
Oh, it's beautiful outside. Yes, it's good. And Diana, where are you calling from? Tell us about yourself.
You're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute.
I thought my fan in the background might be too loud, so I just muted myself. I know most of you already. Some of you have just met by email, a phone conversation, or on the ambassador chats as well. I've been here with Oarboard since the beginning, been with the designers, working with it a few years before that. Been some rowing with Adam, all of us over the years have been a crew together for quite a history with all of us. So it's great to get this ambassador community happening and working and growing steadily every day. It's been pretty exciting, definitely. So welcome everyone.
Welcome. And yeah, my name's Adam Creek. I am known to be second place to Diana Lazier in the R2AK. That's my claim to fame. Silver medalist in the tango boat class. No, my excuse is that I caught a big current. She read the currents much better than I did. Beat me in that race. And I'll do a little bit of self-promotion too. I've been recording a podcast over the last month. Every Friday, I'm releasing a conversation with one of the Canadian Olympic rowers, rowing crews. So if you're curious about kind of peeling off the layer of the onion and getting a better sense of some of these crews, I'm asking questions about their history, as well as talking about technique, mental training, sports science, physiology, spirituality, mindfulness. All of this comes up in the conversation, so you can dig deeper into the one little corner of the sport of rowing, which is certainly Olympic rowing. And I'm going to use Olympic rowing as a segue to introduce this guy, give him a little bit of props. Aquil Abdullah. I remember, one of the first times I actually met Aquil and had a one-on-one conversation. I've obviously seen him from afar because we were, he was on the American team, I was on the Canadian team. But I just remember him being a very friendly guy. We had good conversations at the head of the Charles. I know he lives in Boston, and it was a couple years ago. He's like, that Oarboard thing, I really like that Oarboard thing. And not only is Aquil a great rower, he won the Diamond Sculls, the Royal Henley in England, which is a great accomplishment. Qualified the double scull for the US for the first time in a long time. America's not known for its scullers. So, definitely representing the sculling side of the competitive environment. He's a dad. He likes surfing, playing the guitar, but also a software engineer. And I think that's what drove him into Hydrow. And then Hydrow would be silly if they had a guy like Aquil and put him on as one of the athletes. So here we've got Aquil, man of the hour. I'm going to tell us a little bit about his story of rowing and about storytelling. So let's take him away, Aquil.
Wow, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Adam. Hello, everyone. I am, when Adam said, hey, can you talk to the ambassador community? I was like, sure. And I really had no idea what I was going to talk about. But it dawned on me that through my work at Hydrow, we're constantly trying to tell a story that connects people with being on the water. And it dawned on me that as ambassadors, what we're trying to do is connect people with our Oarboard journeys. And what is a good way to do that? And, one of the things, or I guess the two main things that I've thought about in preparing for this conversation were one, details, and the other is make it personal, because so much of what we're doing is building a relationship with people. You know, why do they want to get an Oar board? Why do they want to go on these adventures? How is the Oar board going to help, enrich their lives? So with that being said, I'll start out. I'm sort of jumping right into this. Let me back up a little bit. Yeah, so as Adam said, I started rowing in Washington, D.C. And I was recruited to row in college after about 6 months of rowing. And I had to decide whether or not I wanted to row or play football in college. And I chose rowing because I personally did not like getting hit as much as you do in American football. So much to my dad's disappointment, he played football. I went on to row, and it culminated with racing at the 2004 Olympic Games. And in that journey, there were so many things that were important to making me the person that I am. But when I look back upon my experiences, what I find to be sort of the most memorable are the relationships that I've built. The fact that I can see Adam at the head of the Charles, and we can talk about that time that we spent on the Razzie, I don't know, racing at Lucerne, or, you know, we have all of these common connections that we have. The fact that I can go to places all over the world. This is what my wife finds fascinating. I will say, okay, we're going to go visit friends in France. And she'll be like, okay, where are we going? It's like, I don't know, let me make a phone call and see who's doing what. And those are relationships that I've built, and it may have only been a brief moment, but those relationships are lasting. And those are the shared experiences that we have that sort of form the human experience. And so this thing, social media that we have, it provides a way for us to tell stories and to connect with people. And, you know, when I'm rowing, doing a workout on Hydrow, there's the facet of actually trying to improve people's fitness. So there are some parameters that I have where I'm like, okay, in a minute, we're going to take the rhythm up to, or the stroke rating up to a 28. But let me tell you about that time my dog chewed up my shoes, and going back before that and maintaining that. So what I've learned through this experience is that you tell stories that help people connect. So I'll tell you a story in two different ways, the same story. So this morning I got up and I went for a row on the Charles, and it was beautiful. The leaves were changing colors, and I really loved the crimson and the gold of the leaves. It reminded me of the time that my father and I would rake leaves, and the smell of burning leaves and wood as we changed, as we burned the leaves that were piling up in our yard. And in some ways it made me a bit sad, because I long for those times of being a kid and all of the exciting adventures that I used to get into with my dad. But while rowing along, there was a Canadian goose that came along and got in my way. And as it just missed my oar, I thought about all of the times that I had raced at the head of the Charles, and how many times I had come close to missing a bridge. Okay, so that's just one way of telling a story about me rowing on the Charles. Was there anything that stood out to anyone in that story?
I can relate to the childhood experience.
Yeah.
We rake leaves, had a lot of trees, and my dad would curse the fact that they were all deciduous and fell every year, and always wish we had more evergreens. But we all had fun doing it.
Yeah.
And we burned them.
Yeah. Anyone else?
What about you, Dana? What stood out to you?
Just the connection with his dad was nice to, you know, think about childhood and the time spent with his father.
Anyone
Jeffrey?
else? Yeah.
I just love the little sensational cues, the colors and the smells, and how those can remind us of memories, especially when we're getting in that meditative state while we're rowing. That's what I love about it.
Okay. Alan?
I don't know what I can say about that.
That's fair.
I just don't know. I mean, I try to relate to what I'm doing when I'm rowing, and when I'm rowing, I don't even remember what I think about. I just like focus on what it is that I'm doing at the moment.
Right. So I'll change tacks here. And the one thing so what I've learned is how do we connect with people? So like some people have great experiences with their dad, right? Like Martin picked up on that in the leaves. Some people are very sense oriented. So the detail of what I saw, the leaves changing color, the smell, those things. And so when you're telling a story, I try to find something that people can connect with in terms of relationships, maybe people had a bad relationship with their father, but they're connecting this story with something that they know and are familiar with, and telling the little details. Maybe it's not that relationship, but it's that little minute detail, the color of the leaves, the smell, the goose that is there in the water. You're out there rowing and you fly by and the geese take off and you hear the flapping of the wings. And so one of the things is, how do you connect with all of those senses that people have that then connect with the memory? And so what I found is that I will do episodes rowing, and people will remind me of a piece of the story that they connected with that I had no idea, that wasn't even a major theme of the story. But that's what you find, is that we all have different experiences, but we all have relationships and we all connect, memories through our senses. And so the tough part now is, how do you take sort of a story like that and put it into an Instagram post or an Instagram story or a Facebook story, And so that's a little bit harder to do. You have a small amount of space to tell this story. And one of the things that I do is I try to pick out just like, the things that I think connect most with people. And so that's one of that is the trick that I use. And then we tie that into like, well, then what really motivates people into sort of taking action on that? You want to get people to engage with that. And so the thing that I do there is prompt them with a question, right? So if we're telling that story on social media, we may not have enough space to say like, the leaves were this color, the trees were this color, the smell was this, but like, in your post, you say, tell me about a time when X, or, do you have any, I'd love to hear about your experiences with with your parents or with someone in the fall, and you build that story into something where now you're giving them a thread to come back into the conversation. And so rather than just post, hey, I took my Oarboard out in Winnipeg today, it was great, or in Toronto, or in Michigan on the lake today, it was cold, the waves were out, people were surfing, what's the coldest water you've ever, rode in? And then that way you're building a conversation with people and you're telling your story. So that's, sort of what I had for basically talking about. It wound up, I was going to tell 2 stories, but I think that I actually, with one story, sort of gave away all of the tricks, if you will. So does anyone have any questions about that? No. Wow. Was it that good?
It's good. Well, it's. I'm going to share. Where do we go? Let me see.
Yeah.
It's,
So yeah. So one thing that I do when we're working with newer athletes is I'll ask them to pick a topic, and give them a little bit of time to think about that memory and try to tie into it some details and some relationships, about people, and then we can see what things sort of stick out with the rest of the people in the group. And that's sort of how you begin to find what connections really stick. And then maybe think about a question that you would ask to get people to engage with you back. So how does that sound, Adam?
I think that sounds great. I think we go through the, maybe we go around in the circle.
Yeah.
And we'll each share a story. And let me just. I'm going to change the view up, and I'm going to share my screen because I was taking some notes while you were talking. So this is what I had up here. Tell your story. The human experience is a shared experience. Can you tell your story in a way that connects with others? I'm going to turn that down so it's easy to see. Yeah. And the first story that you told, or the story. We talked about relationships, physical sensations, and connecting memories with our senses. And then the final point was, can you add a question to your post or a prompt to stimulate a conversation? So an okay story was, I took my oarboard out today in Winnipeg. Okay, Gary, tell us more. You can do better than that. So, yeah. So a better story is, I took my oarboard out today in Winnipeg and the water was cold. And I was just trying to imagine, say, like when I went to the cottage in the winter with my children. Ice fishing, right? And so, okay, we're building it out. And do you have a time when you were out in the water like this? And so prompting, and it reminds me of something I heard. It was Commander Hatfield, actually, who's an astronaut up here in Canada, who made a big splash about 10 years ago when he was on the space station. And he really rocked the social media. And what he said was, it's social media for a reason. There's two words. It's social media. It's not just broadcast. It's all the social part is what makes it engaging and interacting. So when we're posting, we're looking for ways to interact with one another, to encourage and engage the conversation, to drive the conversation and build relationships that are meaningful too. Because the better that we can have these conversations, the deeper we can truly understand one another and see how we are reflections of one another and learn from one another and support one another, and do all those positive things that can occur with social media and avoid the negative things that can really get us down. So how about we do a round robin, and we'll go through each and every one of us. I'll give everyone maybe a minute to really kind of think about what kind of story you want to tell of a recent time you were rowing or you had your oar board out. And we'll try to use this. We'll use relationships, physical sensations, and connecting memories with our senses, and then finish our story with a prompt. And then we'll see if the prompt actually stimulates a conversation amongst ourselves. How does that sound? It's good. Got some nodding.
Awesome.
Okay. I'm going to start the timer. Ready, set, go.
Yeah, who's first? Okay.
Do you want to have a list? So we're going to
Why
go Gary, Diana, Jeffrey, Dana, Deb, Alain, Martin, and if there's time, Aquil will tell us another story.
Hey,
How's that sound?
Made it easy on me. That's great. I get to go last.
So do you want it to be an Oar Board story or?
Any, let's make it an Oar Board story, seeing as
Okay.
we're the Oar Board ambassadors. And I guess I should go first. I want to tell a story too, so I'll tell a story as well. So we go Adam, Gary, Diana, Jeffrey, Dana, Alain, Deb, Martin, Marty, Aquil.
So I'm testing my mic. Can you guys hear me?
Oh, you sound great, Deb. Love
Thank
it.
you.
So I'll start. I'll give it a go. You know, the other day I was out rowing with my son Jefferson and a bunch of his friends. He's a little 10-year-old boy. And so if you can picture a bunch of 10-year-old boys, almost akin to Lord of the Flies. And it was one of those hot days where you're standing there and the sun is beating down on you, but we were on the ocean, which was quite cold. So it was this interesting, intersection where you'd stand in the water to cool down, but it would get too cold in the ocean. So then you'd get out, it would be too hot on land. And what I love so much about rowing on the Oar Board with Jefferson and then his friends, they were rowing around and then they got tired of the rowing unit. So they took it off. And then about 8 of them piled on to the onto the 16-foot SUP, and they're all paddling along with the oars like SUP oars, and they're using the SUP paddle, and they're kind of on and off and going around, and it was a ton of fun just to watch them be children, connect with nature, and just have fun, fooling around on the water. And I guess I suppose, it's about messing around in boats. And do you have any good memories of when you were young, when you were 10 years old, just being out on the water, messing around in boats?
Nice. Yes, I do.
Yeah. Garrett.
Lots of good rowboat stories.
Good rowboat stories? Tell me a good rowboat story then.
Pram, we flip it upside down and do all kinds of bad things in the air pocket underneath that the parents were always crazy about. Don't do that.
You'd flip it over and you'd have an air pocket, and then you'd climb under and just breathe in
Absolutely.
the air pocket.
5 or 6 neighborhood kids.
Yeah, we used to flip our sunfish all the time out sailing, at the lake, and it was always good fun. But we did the same thing. We would try to sneak attack kids on other islands by having the canoe upside down, not realizing how odd it was to have a student. So it was a telltale sign.
Upside down.
My happy childhood rowing memory was rowing at a lake, and it was a very cheap inflatable raft with 2 oars attached, and it was totally inefficient, but just the sense of adventure of oh, let's just keep rowing it out a little farther. Rowing with my big brother definitely, I think, sort of instilled the rowing adventure bug in me at an early age.
I think my experience is as a Boy Scout. So I got as a Boy Scout, a rowing merit badge, and I also got my canoeing merit badge. Rowing was at a mountain lake where there's in Southern California that still operates as a Boy Scout camp. And to be out there in this beautiful lake and have this instructor teaching like a half a dozen of us how to row this boat and the things you had to do to qualify to get the merit badge was fun. The canoe, I took canoeing in the ocean on Camp Cherry Valley. I still remember, on Catalina Island right off Los Angeles. You do in the ocean there. And I remember that one because that one was where we had to paddle for, this was like 2 or 3 days, and we kind of took a little final exam. And then in that case, the Boy Scout leader let us like do whatever we wanted. And that's kind of when we went out and stood up in the seat and jumped off and got back in and flipped them. And you kind of let us all play around with them, versus before that was all very structured, very serious about how to make this canoe paddle. So yeah, I can still remember those days. I've always liked the water, still do today.
Well, let's move on to Gary. Tell us a story.
So here's my very first Oarboard story. So I think somewhere in the instructional setup video, which I diligently watched before assembling the thing, it said 10 or 15 minutes. Well, the first time it was more like half an hour. Believe it or not, I managed to do a couple of things wrong, but recovered the whole thing and launched it in the water. And I've always wondered, like, how steady is this going to be? It's my daughter-in-law's SUP, so I've never really used it too much. I paddle it once just to try it out. I mean, how steady is this going to be getting on? I'm 215, and it's like, this is a 12-foot board. I'm kind of wondering about this. So we get on, and it's good, and everything is new. So I haven't rowed since I was 12. I've never had to feather the blade before, et cetera, but I'm pretty keen. I'm going to try everything. All the different strokes I watched in the videos, the technique, don't mess with your wrist and try and keep it straight. And I'm thinking about 1,000,001 things trying to row this thing. And I'd get about 3 strokes in a row. And then, I don't know, my hands would bump, or one blade was feathered and one wasn't. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? And of course, I had to go all the way. So I've got the little accessory on the back. I borrowed my son's GoPro, and just like Martin was saying earlier, I'm looking at the GoPro and I'm thinking, hey, this thing has moved a little bit. I should probably adjust that. My video is going to be totally messed up. Well, it's angled back and I can't quite reach the head of the thing. So okay, what am I going to do now? Oh, I guess I have to scoot a little bit towards the back of the boat. It seemed like a good idea at the time. So try not to rock the thing side to side too much. Okay, being very careful. Edge off the seat. So far, so good. Still can't quite reach the GoPro. Slide down a little more. Lean over to reach that GoPro. Now I'm fiddling with it, and the back of the board is sinking. And I'm thinking, in another second, you're about to flip over. And this is not going to be good. The water's not all that bad. But hey, your first outing, you do not want to flip over. So I'm wondering, has anybody ever had an Oarboard disaster that they want to talk about?
I haven't, but I'm always fascinated by all the postings, particularly the Facebook group, that people flip them, and I still scratch my head. Maybe it's because I started out in skinny boats. I just can't imagine, other than some massive wake from a super tanker. I'm always amazed at how people can flip them because they're just so darn stable. So I kind of enjoy reading those stories, but still can't quite identify with them.
Gary, my first time out, I had watched the video as well, but hadn't appreciated that you need to put both of the straps on. So I put only one strap holding the oarboard to the SUP. And so I got out on the lake and I was kind of leaning back, and the whole thing flipped up. So I was on my back on the lake. I had to kind of like put myself back up. It was really stupid. I felt really dumb, but just laughed it off. It was fine. I didn't flip the boat. I was glad for that.
Oh,
But yeah, both straps are helpful.
right. You'll never do that again.
Won't do that again.
My Oarboard disaster story was early on. I guess I just don't have a very high pain tolerance, but I just found that my legs got numb and my butt got sore if I was out rowing for more than an hour. But after all the work getting it set up, I just wanted to be out there as long as I could. So I immediately began experimenting with more comfortable seating arrangements. And one of the more ill-advised ones was strapping down a stadium football chair to the Oarboard seat with, I think it was some sort of bungee cord. And unfortunately, my girlfriend was out there with me while I was experimenting, and we did not make it very far before I tipped us both over. So I'm much more confident in the seating arrangement I have now. Found the right camping chair that was, low to the board and firmly attached were the key elements in making that experiment successful.
I love that. I loved your story, Gary, how I was expecting you to tell me that you fell in the water, but it actually, you didn't. So it was a good counterintuitive ending. And I feel the need to share with you a story with the Oarboard. When I completely bailed, I brought my Oarboard down to Rio. I had this great job as a journalist at the Rio Olympics. And so I was taking the Oarboard and I was rowing in these cool little lagoons, but there are these beautiful waves at Ipanema, the big beach. And so I thought, I want to catch a big wave on my Oarboard. And so I row it out and into a 2-meter wave, and I catch it for about half a second, and then it turns me to the side. It lifts up the rigger and it tumbles me over, and I had the biggest bail you can imagine. And I suppose I was the author of my own disaster. Testing the limits of the
You have that on
Oarboard.
video as well, Adam.
I do. Yeah, we captured that on video. So let's go on to Diana. You're next.
Definitely had a few surfing videos, same kind of story, but one really fun one was we did a 4-day camping trip with, I think we had 4 20-liter dry bags of gear on a 16 with a double. We have fishing rod, crab trap, just every bit of gear you could have for camping out in the ocean. And a lot of our friends hiked there, so it was somewhere you couldn't get to by any other means besides taking the Oarboard. There's pretty big surf coming in, so there wasn't even many other boats around or anything. And so on our departure, we'd mastered coming in pretty good, watching for the low wave and just landing right on shore and having our feet undone so you could just hop off as you get to shore. But taking off into the wave, trying to get past that break when we had to leave that morning was a little rougher. And Sarah, that's in a lot of our videos with us, her son was on shore with some friends. So we made it past the first one, but the second one came up a little bigger and tumbled us pretty good with the whole crowd watching. So that was fun. And, but we flipped around and hopped on and didn't lose a single thing. Everything was bungeed to the deck, all our bags, everything, and climbed aboard and took off without any issue. So it was a good ending for everyone watching, being like, where's my mom flipping over? But we cruised off, and that was in some colder ocean too, but it sure showed us, how easily everything is attached, and flipped it back around. And we got that on video as well. That's the only thing. Most of our adventures were also putting on GoPro, so you get to see exactly how it went down.
That's great. So structure, talk about relationships, connect memories with our senses, end with a prompt to stimulate conversation. What's your prompt to stimulate conversation, Diana?
Mostly just telling the different kind of fun adventures we've done before. People always just are just shocked of some of the stuff we've been able to do, especially as rowers, anyone with any rowing background knowing compared to a shell. If you go out and surf, what kind of waves, and telling stories like that and climbing back on, or even just being able to go out and some big water and jump off and dive off and climb back on to take a cool off while you're out there. I think adventure is pretty much my biggest excitement to share with people, because I've rode all over the world in so many cool places and different waters and different stories and camping trips and everything. So the next adventure is always a good story. And we're working on always working on the next one as well.
Right. Well, and I suppose where's, good prompt after that story would be like, where would you want to go? Right? What's the next adventure that you'd love to
next
take
one
the
we're
Oar Board?
working on, there's actually a company based in Galapagos, but they are spend half their year in Victoria. So we actually met them through some mutual friends that said, this is the kind of next adventure you guys should be doing. So we're, waiting on travel restrictions and seeing what we can do, but we hope to be going there sometime between October to the end of the year and doing some rowing in some of the most beautiful waters and locations, and apparently get to row by penguins and some of the neatest things you'll ever see. And the whole trip is done by a large boat that we'll be traveling on for 8 days and just going out on different tours every day from water. So that is on the list, and hopefully happens with some stories to follow it soon.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a dream Oar Board trip that they'd want to go on?
Maybe like the fjords of somewhere, and like just that, I think would be kind of cool to just like over in Scandinavia somewhere and just rowing through like seeing glaciers and stuff like that, or fjords. And I think an amazing background, just the sound of water, in that area. That would be a pretty cool adventure.
Yeah, I follow several sailing blogs, and it's like every body of water I go, I want to row there. Every time I watch a movie and there's a body of water, it's like, I want to row there. It's just, and so I do take a few rowing vacations. I've got one coming up next month even, where I'm just going to head up to Northern California, row a couple of lakes on the way. It's just, sort of, as I say, I've never met a body of water I didn't want to row on.
Some neighbors of mine next year are going to take a trip. They're going to do kayaks from Lake Itasca, which is the start of the Mississippi River, down to Minneapolis, St. Paul. And they said, do you want to come along with me? And I was thinking, I wonder if I could bring the Oar Board on the Mississippi, because it's small up there, but I think it'd be fun.
How far is the distance of the trip?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think how far it would be, because the river doesn't meander all that much. It would probably be maybe 150 miles.
Oh, wow. And the camping along the way, or?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Well, let's move to Jeffrey. Tell me your story, include relationships, connect your memories with senses, and end with a prompt to stimulate a conversation.
Ooh, that's a tall order. We'll see how many of those I can hit.
Okay.
But I think I was initially drawn to get the Oar Board because I wanted to reconnect with the outdoorsy, adventurous, exercising lifestyle I had in my teen. I was an Eagle Scout, but in my 20s, life gets in the way, and found I had gotten too much more sedentary inside life than I was happy with. So Oar Board was a good way for me to reinvigorate and jumpstart my 30s, to reconnect with the kind of person I wanted to be more. And one of the first people I took out on the Oar Board was a friend I'd met at a new job, and I was just very pleasantly surprised at how fun and easy it was to have a conversation on the Oar Board. I think my impression of rowing from the outside was like, it's a very intense, hardcore sport, and everyone is like exerting maximum effort. So it was just a pleasant surprise to see, if you dial back the intensity, it's actually really easy to have a fun conversation out on the water. And so that really inspired me to get to know other rowers in my local community in Austin. And so I joined the local Austin Rowing Club, where I will be learning to row on an 8 later this month. And really excited about that, because I've had to wait for over a year with the pandemic before I could get in that class. So that'll be a lot of fun and a good way for me to meet some other local rowers and hopefully lots of other potential oarboard enthusiasts. But yeah, I guess that reminds me of a good conversation prompt is, can you think of any good conversations or special bonding moments you've had with family or loved ones that you feel like just a simple act of rowing together really facilitated in a unique and surprising way? It's like a special thing that's hard to describe to people who haven't experienced it for themselves, but I'm sure y'all know what I'm talking about.
I really like the part about taking out a new coworker and that experience of being able to communicate. That for me, that really resonated, and sort of how I just like to have conversations and having, attesting to the fact that there's usually very little talking in the boat from the athletes. The fact that this is something that you can do with other people and enjoy the experience together. So that connected with me. Yeah.
That's great. Well, let's keep it rolling. Dana. So again, remember, I'm going to do this. I'm going to share the screen. So make sure that we're using the method of, we call it the Aquil method. Tell your story. Talk about relationships that people can relate to, connect memories with senses, end with a prompt to encourage back and forth conversation. Okay, you ready, Dana?
Sure. Okay, like I said, I'm in northern Michigan. I'm on a lake, so 3 or 4 days a week, kind of every other day, I go in the morning and row. I'm usually out fairly early, like 7 a.m., which might not be that early for you guys, but there's usually nobody else around. I kind of row down to the state park. The light is beautiful. Like, I just love seeing the sun on the water. And it's often just very, very still, and you really don't hear much of anything. If I'm lucky, I get to hear the loons in the morning if the loons are on the lake that morning. And I'll row down, and it's just kind of meditative and peaceful, and I really enjoy it. And I come back. And that summer, my neighbor was renting his cottage, and there were renters there. And I noticed almost every morning that one particular week, there was a guy who was down on the dock, and he seemed to really enjoy, being out with his coffee and kind of the peaceful morning. And so I started to, chat with him when I came back. And so every time that I was rowing and I came back, we'd kind of strike up a conversation, and kind of helped me realize how lucky I am that I work for myself anyways, even when there's not a pandemic. So I can live up here in the summer and enjoy being on the lake and all the different parts of nature that I enjoy. And just, chatting with him. And then he invited me over for cocktails with, he was up here with another couple, and, had a nice time with them. And they came back last summer, and they rented a different cottage a couple doors down. So I kind of connected up with them again, and they had invited me over for cocktails. And I was sitting next to his friend, who I never saw down on the dock in the morning. And he's kind of a heavier guy, so he didn't really look that maybe into fitness to me. But they're really nice. And I'm talking to him, and he's like, "Are you still rowing?" And I said, "Yes." And he's like, "I'd really love to learn how to do that. Could you kind of give me a lesson?" And I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to. It'll take sort of several mornings, because you can't just kind of hop on and go, or I don't think most people can. Maybe some people can." So I started to kind of teach this guy in the morning how to row, and he really enjoyed it. And I just wonder if you guys, any of you, have ever just met someone like you're out rowing and they're seeing you rowing and it looks like fun, but they've never rowed ever in any way, and they want to learn how to do it, which is great. But how do you sort of help people learn? I mean, he was here for a week, so I could give him a few different lessons, but it's so hard to do, and it's not something you can just hop on and go. So how do you sort of approach that if someone does want to learn how to row?
Well, I can start. I guess I've been teaching novice rowing for, I think, 16 years through my local club. I'm really not a U.S. rowing certified coach, but I do teach novice rowing. And after about, with each, if it was a private lesson, after about not more than 20, 30 minutes on an erg, and then demonstrating how to feather on land, we'll put the oars on some slings and do it on land. They go right into a boat. I mean, they're 30 minutes after your first lesson, we have them in a boat. And this is a skinny boat. So we have to teach them how to balance a little bit more. But I don't know, I've been doing it so long, I kind of do the same formula, and everybody rows. I mean, we start with just arms only, no legs, and they just
Right.
start rowing away, and everybody's nervous, everybody grips too tight, you know, it's a given. Even the better people who catch on a little bit faster, everybody's a little more tense. So like a lot of the hydros, almost every hydro row I'm in, Aquil or the other folks are always saying the same thing: relax your shoulders, relax your arms. And it's really the truth, because sometimes I'll get too tense just by habit, I guess. But I found if it's just a little patient with them and kind of just maybe do a little bit of prep on the land, and of course the oarboard, you could sit there right on the beach and have them sit on it first before they even get in the water. But that would be my one tip.
Yes.
Yeah, I had
Alright.
him just
Go
like
ahead.
I said, arms only to start. That was all I could really think of. I mean, I've never taught anyone, so I was like, oh.
Well, I love that. And I'm just going to say, with the prompt, asking for advice, people love giving advice and sharing that. And that's a great way to stimulate a conversation, to get a conversation going.
Oh,
let's-
one little tip I wanted to add as far as getting a novice rowing on the oarboard. If you Google SUP trainer or SUP pontoons, there's a simple little product. I can do a quick search and put the link in the chat, but they're basically just inflatable pontoons that wrap on the side of your paddleboard, and it just gives some extra stability the way training wheels would for a bicycle. So if you find that like a novice is having trouble keeping the paddleboard stable, that's something that will totally work with the oarboard.
Thanks.
That's cool.
I had
Well,
no
that's-
idea.
Pontoons, great tip. Alain.
Yes, so I don't know how my story fits in all this, but for me, I just want to talk about probably the reason why I got involved with that oarboard in the first place. And the reason being is that, by the way, I'm 70 years old. I'm a triathlete. Well, that means that I swim, I run, and of course I ride my bike for quite a long distance and stuff like that. I have a couple of triathlons scheduled this year coming, hopefully, finally. And throughout my entire life, when I got started, I had no role modeling at all for any sport. I got started running when I was about 20. My dad was a sportsman, but on TV watching every sport and so on and so forth. And for some reason, I just decided to go on, and I chose never to get my kids involved unless I did the sport with them. So, I mean, we learned, I was a skier. All kids became ski instructor. I'm a runner. Some of them was running. I do bike and so on and so forth. And the only thing that's different in my entire life is that when my only son, as a matter of fact, I had two daughters and a son, signed up for University McGill, the first thing he did, he took on rowing as a sport. So, I mean, that was new because that was the first time one of my kids was doing something that I'd never done. I mean, I had rowed boats when I was a kid, but I hated that because it was so difficult to do and so on and so forth. And of course, my son ended up working for McGill pretty much across the country and so on and so forth. And I always wanted to figure out a way to buy maybe one day a skiff to row with him and so on and so forth. And of course, he's a master with a club here. And at some point, I decided without telling him to sign up in a course at the same club, incognito. And in order to learn to be able to do that famous, how do you learn to row on that tiny little skiff thing without ending up in the water and so on and so forth. And he caught me. Anyway, to make a story short. And I remember me and him ending up finally rowing together. And after a couple of kilometers of being in the skiff with him, I realized that the only person who was rowing, as a matter of fact, was me. And the reason why the only one rowing is that my son, who was experienced in rowing, was just maintaining balance. So both of us did not tip every time I was like, try to row and so on and so forth. And of course, I mean, I realized at some point that buying a real skiff was maybe a good idea, but how do you travel with a skiff all over wherever you're going and so on and so forth. And this is how I ended up buying that amazing device that I can use without being concerned that somebody needs to maintain the balance with me and so on and so forth, right? And of course, I mean, why rowing for me? Well, because if you run, if you bike, and if you swim, technically you don't build your upper body very, very much. And of course, rowing for me, it's the compensation. I hate weightlifting. So for me, it's how I train and I try to strengthen my upper body. Of course, my legs are already strong in order to do the rowing and so on and so forth, but that's how I got involved with the Oar Board. And I've searched so many things on the website in order to find something that I figure was doing the job. And this technology that I bought was exactly it. And I mean, I really like it. I love it. And you know, when I talk about it to other people, I always ask them, well, what do they do with their kids? How are they getting involved? And, you know, I mean, what kind of sport are they doing and why are they doing it? Right. So, I mean, for me, that's pretty much a little of my story on rowing.
Well, I love that. And I think let's kind of keep going so we can get everyone to share the story before we end. And, you know, you talked about the relationship with your son, you know, the senses of being off balance. And then you ended with the question about how are you connecting with your kids, which, you know, 1, 2, 3, you know, relationships, connect memories with senses, and, you know, end with the prompt to encourage back and forth conversations. Deb, what's your story?
Yeah, so I grew up in Minnesota and spent a lot of summers on lakes in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And so I've always loved the water. And after I graduated law school and became a lawyer, I moved to the Bay Area and I missed water because unlike Minnesota where there's lakes everywhere, of course, the Bay Area has the bay. And I met some people who were part of a master's novice program at the Stanford Rowing Club, and that's how I got involved in rowing. Fast forward now, it's 25, 30 years later, and I miss rowing, but finding an 8 in Reno, not so easy. So this last year, because of COVID, I was just going a little stir crazy and found the Oar Board. So my Oar Board came this spring, and I took my son out to our little lake. We have a small lake in our neighborhood that is just a little reservoir. So my son and I are down at the marina in the neighborhood and putting up the Oar Board for the first time. And it was interesting because there was a group of women, one of whom was doing this Mississippi River trip out on their kayaks, and they were coming back to the shore as we were trying to figure out how to set this thing up. And they said, well, we want to see you row it. So we're going to go out and do around the lake again. We'll come back. So they came back twice because we were still setting it up because of how much experience we did not have yet with putting it up. So then we got out on the Oar Board, my son and I, and we're out rowing it. And they just thought it looked like fun and were curious to hear about the Oar Board. And so it was a great way to kind of get my son away from his computer out and, you know, get him to try rowing because he just didn't grow up in Minnesota having those kind of experiences. And so I'm hoping to inspire him to be out on the water some more. He's just turned 19. But it was a great conversation starter with the neighbors. And I ended up like making some new friends and having people curious about the Oar Board and telling me, oh, there's a guy down on the lake who has a shell. You should talk to him. And he's got a little setup that he can add a second seat to it. So I can try rowing with him, which will be fun because I only know how to row port in a sweep. And so I'm still learning how to do like 2 hands. It's confusing. So I'm looking forward to getting to know another neighbor through rowing. And I'm just wondering what experiences you guys have had with the Oar Board, because it's such a different looking thing. People, in my experience, have been really curious to talk about what it is, and it makes a good icebreaker, I think, when you're at the beach.
Love it. It's great. Yeah. talked about some relationships, connected memories with senses, and you ended with a prompt to encourage back and forth. Let's do Marty, and then Aquil, you're going to bring us home. We're going to wrap it up.
Okay, well, I thought I'd maybe share an Oarboard demo story because I agree with Deb. It seems like there's no better conversation starter than hopping on your Oarboard or setting it up and launching. So recently, in fact, it was the last prospect that found his way to me, Mark, the one that he actually lives in a community, Deb, about halfway between Truckee and Tahoe City. And he has a small little reservoir there as well as they want to row in the lake. And this was a gentleman who just recently retired from the Bay Area, always wanted to row like a lot of people. He just never knew anything about it and was always fascinated by watching people row in movies and TV commercials. And there's something about it attracted him. He hadn't been doing much recently actively. He wasn't like a career bicycle rider or other things, but he was in good athletic shape. So he happened to be coming down on a vacation where I live, which is about almost 300 miles from where he lives. So Mark came down, and since he was staying near the coast, we went out to Morro Bay rather than row on the beautiful lake where I normally row. And there's a nice sand beach there. So he came down and I made sure we arranged it so he could watch me set it up from the beginning to show how easy it was. I hopped on quickly. There's a nice big harbor in Morro Bay there. So the beach is very nice. There's no large waves. It's easy to launch. And it's like I said, it's sandy. So I hopped in and kind of talking what we were talking about before, you can't see somebody row instantly the first day. So I just gave him some basics, and I wasn't even going to have him worry about feathering. I was just going to have him just pulling those oars. So I didn't even feather. And the oar board, so you can drop your hands enough to get the oars plenty off the water. That seemed to be the simplest way to get him started. And I had some trepidation because when I came back and put on the boat, here's a fellow A, he's never rowed before. B, it's not the ocean, but there is some currents and tides there, and he could have sort of just pushed him away from the beach and not be able to get back. I obviously didn't teach him how to back water, and hopefully I did show him a little bit about how to use one oar to turn in a circle. But his name is Mark. So Mark was intrepid, didn't seem any problem. I held on to the boat a little bit where we worked with his arms, and I just pushed him off. And he really picked up on it really easily. And it wasn't a perfect rower, but he must have rowed 50 yards away that started bothering me. I finally yelled at him. He turned around and rowed back. Then he rowed up, and I actually was able to get some video of him rowing towards Big Morro Rock. If you know, it's a very famous beach there with this big rock that people kind of know it. So it's really kind of pretty. And he came back and was just sold. Like a lot of people, he said, well, I'd like to think about it. And I think he called the very next day and ordered it. So it was just a nice gentleman. We're about the same age. He was, I'm early 70s, maybe he was late 60s, early 70s. So we identified with a lot of things, both like the water. I knew where he lived, and I rode in some of the little reservoirs and lakes around there as well. So it was just a fun experience to watch somebody pick up so quickly. And somehow I kind of sensed that he might be fairly skilled at it, and he was. So I'm just curious if anybody else has any demoing stories they want to tell.
It's great. Great method. Describe some relationships, connected memories with senses, and, finished with a prompt. What we're calling the Aquil Abdullah method, as you can see. Right, and I tried to pick a picture in the background that showed relationships. The picture also connects some kind of with the senses as you look at the little boy right here riding on the bow, feeling and then finishing up with a question. So let's bring us home, Aquil, and then we'll wrap it up.
Oh, those are all some amazing stories. I have yet to have an experience, any of those experiences. My experience on the Oarboard though is hasn't actually been with it as an Oarboard yet, because as I was assembling the Oarboard, I was looking at online videos, and I couldn't figure for the life of me how to get my strap wrapped around the Oarboard. It was too short. Had I been the smart guy that I think I am, I would have realized that the D-rings on the board were how I was supposed to secure the actual rigger and seat to the board. Luckily, Adam was kind enough not to call me out too poorly. He just said, "Did you happen to notice those rings on the top of the deck of the board?" That's how you secure the Oarboard to the board. But what I was able to do, and I'll make this quick, was I was able to go out on the Charles River and use it as a SUP. And what I really love about the Oarboard is its versatility, and I went out with a friend of mine that I've known for about 15 years now, and he lives in Cambridge in the city, and I live out in the country in Ipswich, and we hadn't really had the chance to get together much over the past year, but we went out and we were paddling along the Charles River, and we were saying to ourselves, why didn't we do more of this when we were single and had plenty of time to? Why did we go to bars and hang out and not really take advantage of all of this beauty out here? We're both married now, and what it really made me realize is that the ability to get out there and paddle down the river and talk about sort of our old times and shenanigans, and all of the stuff we enjoyed and all of the stuff that we didn't do, and hopefully talk about doing more of this. It's like one of my closest now, we got to commit to getting out here on the river, maybe just bring a beer at least once a month. And so I now have a new tradition because I have an Oarboard. So what traditions are you creating with your Oarboard? So yeah, tried to hit on all of the points there briefly. But I will say that this has been a lot of fun, and hearing all of your stories has really made me excited about being part of this community. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Adam.
Well, I love that. Big round of applause. Yeah, for everybody. And Martin's obviously done the Divas climb row, and
yeah.
Let's wrap it up. What traditions will you create with the Oarboard? And it's a great piece of equipment. It's made to connect us with one another, connect us with our senses, connect us with nature, with the higher power, and grow conversations and connections. So if anyone wants to stick around, I don't know, what's your timing like, Aquil? Because I know Marty might have a question for you or two.
Let me take a look. The calendar is right here. Oh, it looks like I'm free. We are canceling my episodes tonight because of the heat index. So I have some time. I would like to get some more of Martin's novice prompts for rowing. That would be useful as I try to communicate and articulate what it's like to row.
Well, I'm only going to do that if you get out your saxophone. I'm only going to do that if you get out your saxophone and play us something. He's always
Luckily, my youngest is taking a nap, so I can opt out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, you're excused. Well, no, all I would say is I really don't have any questions for Aquil, even though it's a rare opportunity, but he is all of the not to so much give a commercial here, but the whole Hydrow experience is pretty amazing. And the storytelling, which is part of every single row, which is Aquil is really good at. He is one of my favorites. I can say that with all honesty. Give me a lie detector test, but honestly, because he's always got a smile on his face. He tells the best stories. Sometimes there's even little historical stories depending on where he's rowing, but then just life stories. And Hydrow tries to, I assume that's the way that the model is built, that they build their rows around certain stories. So because all of them do it, but he's just a particularly good storyteller, and it does evoke lots of feelings, and then it also does make the sometimes, because this diva row is a tough row. I try to keep up even at my age, and it just goes by so fast. You just can't believe it. I was a lifelong Concept 2 owner that I mean, literally the day after I got my Hydrow, I put my Concept 2 on the market, sold it, and I didn't think I would ever sell it. It's great to work out, and I don't compete any longer, but I do try to stay in shape. But it's just so boring, even though you try to play music or videos or something. But getting the coaching And then getting the motivation you get on the hydro also gets me motivated to take my Oar board out, because I do row in the water every week. I usually row 2 or 3 days, and if I'm lucky, even more. So I try to row as much as I possibly can. So I kind of balance the two. But in the old days, I'd go row and on my boat, and I put in a good row. It's usually an hour or so, and I work out hard. I'm not just coasting along. And I'm dead. Now, even though I row in the lake, I have to get on my hydro, so I come back and do another 20 minutes with a keel, and then collapse for the rest of the day. But it's great. So yeah, I kind of balance the two. But Oar board also, is something that I just have an affinity for Oar board since I found out about it, since I've had mine. And I don't think I've ever been disappointed by not having somebody ask me about it when I put it together and go row. That would probably be the most disappointing thing, but it always does. Somebody always has an interest. And as I shared, I was in Tahoe last week, and every place I went, in fact, sitting in the campground, people walked by and they knew it. They knew all about something. To say, oh yeah, it's that thing where your straps on and you row it. Oh, God, this is so great. Oh man, I got to tell my friend about it. And the one fellow was going to come back, and he never did. But it always gets a lot of interest. So it's fun.
Yeah, the one thing that I am involved in here in the States is trying to increase diversity within the sport of rowing. And the one thing that, really makes the Oar board, kind of cool is that it's accessible. You have these shells or skiffs that are really expensive equipment. Everyone's like, be careful with it. You drop a inflatable board, you're fine, and so I really like that notion of how it can help sort of bring community to the sport. And so that's part of why when Adam and I were having this conversation, it was just like, this is a great thing to promote, because it really does sort of give that accessibility to the sport that may not be there with very expensive shells.
If there's anything I can ever do to help, let me know.
Will do.
Well, if there's no other comments, it was, let's just say, another round of thank yous. And we'll see you next time at the ambassadors meetings, if you can make it. And have a great Tuesday. And thank you once more, Aquil. Appreciate all that you had to share today. And love the Aquil story method. Describe your relationships, connect, the reader or the listener with memories and with senses, and end with a prompt to encourage a back and forth conversation. So thank you all.
Thank you all. I love that we're all different ages on this group too. It's inspiring. Keep cool.
Great.
It's hot here in Reno. It's over 100.
I'm older than you think. I just shaved, so you can't see all the gray in my beard.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Really nice to meet you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Ciao.